Welcome back to Inside the Paddock. For the first time, we are inside the paddock. That's right, we learned how to use a video call, and we are going to talk about the Canadian Grand Prix up in Montreal this weekend. It was a pretty good race, so gonna hear our takes on it. Here we go. Welcome back to Inside the Paddock. This is episode number 10. We were talking about the Canadian Grand Prix. It was a pretty good weekend up in Montreal. Montreal. And Ken, do you want to take us through the rundown of this race?
Yeah, it was kind of, I don't know. I don't know what to think about that race because for Canada, it was relatively mediocre. Um, Obviously, the wet qualifying was kind of cool, but I felt like the race was a bit disappointing, especially with what we've seen with Canada historically. We've kind of talked about this in the preview, but races like 2011, even last year was kind of fun as well, with the wet to dry to wet race. Um, so yeah, this race was kind of boring, but I still thought it was pretty actionable, pretty intriguing. So if I had to rate it out of 10, maybe a 6 or 7 out of 10. Um, I did enjoy it, but yeah, maybe a bit disappointing for me.
Yeah, I was hoping that we would get more out of this race. I think it was just kind of boring. Like, no one really can challenge Max, not even his teammate. I think I saw something that, like, Perez hasn't made Q3 in almost half of his qualifying appearances, and that's just not what we need to have an exciting race. So I'd give it like a 5 or a 6. I just wasn't that intrigued. Like, I watched most of the race, but at a certain point, I just kind of turned it off and did something else. Like, it just wasn't interesting to me.
I don't know. I thought it was a pretty solid race. I thought it was better than most of the races this year. Even about halfway through, I told my brother that I want to keep watching it instead of doing something else. So, um, I don't know. It was a lot closer than I was surprised to see that Max didn't really pull away from everyone. Although I never had a doubt that he was going to win. It was just even that was kind of an interesting aspect. So yeah, we kind of do we think that's a sign of the Red Bull closing up to the gap, or was that just kind of a track tire specific deal where Max couldn't really pull away from Lewis and Fernando to the extent that he typically is?
I feel like I
I think
remember. Go ahead, Country.
I think it was just kind of like a race where Max wasn't he didn't like try his hardest. And I know that kind of has like a bad vibe to it, but kind of like when you lose, you just say, "Oh, I wasn't really trying." But I don't think he was going the best he could. We saw him like he was literally laughing throughout the race. When he almost crashed at turn 9, I think it was. He was like, "Oh, I almost took myself out of the race," and he started laughing at that. And I think GP, his engineer, came on the radio at one point and said, "Alonso and Hamilton are pushing much faster than you are, or much harder than you are." Um, and I think that kind of contributed to why the gap wasn't as large as we normally would have expected it to be, just considering the fact that they were both fighting each other and pushing each other for second place. So I think at this point, yeah, the Aston Martin and the Mercedes have made some progress. They are closer than they were at the start, but I still don't think that they're close at this point. So yeah,
Yeah, I wouldn't take Max not pulling away as like the Red Bull, like not being as fast in comparison to the other cars. Like, he doesn't even have to try his hardest to win. Like you said, like, he was laughing on the radio, and he didn't have his best race, but he still won. And as you said, he was just lapping cars. So I wouldn't take it as an indication that maybe other teams are catching up to them. I think the Red Bull's still miles ahead, and I don't think they're going to be at threat this season at all or close to it.
Well, with that being said, I mean, Red Bull still has that wind tunnel like development penalty from exceeding the cost cap last year. I think that'll start to affect them soon. And as well, I think I saw Christian Horner say that that Red Bull is planning to like, pivot their development from this year into next year. That they're going to start like developing their car for next year. Considering all of those things, do you guys think that Red Bull might be at threat? I know Tim, you said you don't, but do you, with that information, do you think that Red Bull might be at threat as the season goes on, or are they just so far ahead? Because the Mercedes, Aston Martin, they're clearly on an upward like trend, and I think. Do you guys think that they'll be able to continue that?
Well, as you said, with like Christian Horner saying that they're gonna start like focusing on the development of the next car, I don't think they'd do that if they believe that they were in like being threatened by the other teams, and so I don't think that they're at threat at all.
Yeah, I mean, I could see them. I could see next year potentially there being a more teams in the fight, especially as we know that Red Bull's like engine straight line speed is probably their biggest strong suit, and as Mercedes kind of continues to figure out their own engine, both them and Aston Martin will probably be able to take steps further, or even like a McLaren or yeah. So this year, I mean, you might see something kind of like last year, how Mercedes won in Brazil, but I don't think there will be a race where Red Bull aren't the favorites. Moving on from the lead Red Bull driver to the other Red Bull driver, Sergio Perez, kind of continued his bad stretch of form. Didn't get out of Q2. Just didn't have a great race. He got that kind of the bare minimum of what he was expected to do, which I think was P6. But I mean, he should be able to pass the Ferraris and really compete for a podium every single race, and he hasn't shown that type of form since probably his last win. So, yeah, it's been pretty bad for Sergio.
Yeah, I would argue that if you're in the Red Bull, like the bare minimum you have to do is like P2. Um, just considering the fact that the Red Bull is so dominant, we think unanimously that it's the fastest car in the grid. I think if you're in that car, you have to be performing either P1 or P2. And the fact that Checo's not is obviously a bad thing. But I feel like a lot of the times it's just the qualifying that messes him up. Now in Canada, that was different. It really did not seem like he had the race pace. And what I was particularly surprised by is the fact that he wasn't able to get past the Ferraris. Because the Ferraris obviously they pitted for hard tires. Now Checo on his medium tires should be faster, but he just wasn't able to close the gap up. And I was really surprised by that, to be honest. So, do you guys think that that's like a what do you guys think is the cause of Checo's lack of pace this weekend? Because we've seen how good he can be, especially at the start of the season. Why has he just not been able to show that same kind of pace that he did in the beginning of the season now?
Well, I think it's because he's racing in countries with human rights. No, I really have no idea what's wrong with him. I think he's just in a funk. I mean, we see athletes in any sport get into stretches like these, and it doesn't help when you're going up against a guy that's been, I mean, nearly flawless, especially lately. I mean, it's upsetting. It's any teammate. There's always some sort of jealousy within a team, and especially in a sport like F1 where, yeah, it's a team sport, but you're not like passing the car to each other. You're not trading off who's driving. It's just you are competing against each other, and to be in the same exact car but not be able to do as good is can be frustrating, I'm sure. And I think he's just in a funk. Like his team principal said, he just needs to get his confidence back. He needs to get that result, and that should get him back on track.
Yeah, like especially if you go back to when like this string of bad performances started, which was Monaco. I think it really might be a crisis of confidence because we saw even like in Miami. Yeah, he didn't win the race, but he was still relatively close to Max. And ever since Monaco, ever since that crash he had in qualifying, he's just not been on the pace. And I think that might be related to like the confidence he lost in Monaco. So that line by Christian Horner though, that was a bit concerning because it was similar to what he said about Gasly and Albon before they were replaced. Um, I don't think Checo will be replaced now, but do you think perhaps he will be at risk at the end of the season if
Uh,
his performances continue?
If these performances continue, then I don't know. I wouldn't be too quick to count him out of the seat next season, but we've seen Red Bull's not scared to give a seat to someone else, like we saw with Pierre and Albon. So I think that they would be the team to kind of ditch Perez, if anyone, but I wouldn't be too quick to count him out yet. I think we need to give him a few more races.
I think he'll have the rest of the season. We'll see how he recovers, and yeah, I mean, who knows what's gonna happen? I think Red Bull have a lot of good drivers. Even a guy like Sonoda has been really good this year. Um, so we'll see. All right. Moving on to second place in the race. It was another good race from Fernando Alonso, who put up a P2. He lost second at the start, and then him and Hamilton had a good battle for almost the entirety of the race, and he ended up staying in second. And I know he said after Spain that he didn't ever want to not be on the podium again. That's what his expectations were, and he definitely followed that up convincingly in Canada. So I don't know if I still don't know if he's going to be enough to get them second in the constructors by himself, but he's doing about as well as he possibly could.
I'm really loving this Alonso season. I want him to get a win, but obviously that's a tall task to take on with Max. But also, I don't think that sort of moving on to Stroll, I just don't know if they can take that P2 with the performances that he's had. You know, a P9 weekend is not what you need when you're battling for P2, and you have Lewis up in P3, and of course George had an unfortunate ending to his week, but I just don't think that Alonso's going to be enough for them given their opponent.
I agree, and I think that kind of puts Stroll at risk of a transfer midseason. A lot of people, I think, assume that because um, Stroll's father is in charge of that team and he's the owner, that Lance can't be replaced. And I think that just is simply false because if you're talking about millions of dollars being lost between P2 and P3 in the constructors, I think that's a lot of money, obviously. So um, because of that, I feel like Lance is definitely at risk of getting swapped out, especially in how close this fight for P2 is. If you're Checo and you're fighting for P1 in the constructors, you're going to be fine because Max is just dominating everything and you have that margin to make mistakes. But if you're Aston Martin, on the other hand, stuck in a very close development battle of Mercedes. I think you have to replace him, to be honest, but I just don't know with who. That's the big question.
Yeah, I don't think he's immune just because his dad owns a team. I think it'd be like a big deal if he was to be uh, switched out, but I mean, his dad seems pretty committed um, to this sport. He wasn't content with getting seventh in the constructors every year, and um, and just the history of that team, Aston Martin, Racing Point, Force India has been midfield the entire time, and he's broken that mold. They've gotten consistent podiums, and like you said, Kenji, I think obviously the money is in it, and just like the getting a second place is a big deal, and I think that's what he wants for his brand. Um, and maybe even if he has to let go of his son to do that, he will. I don't. It's looking like he's going to have to get rid of his son to do that. All right. Moving on to the Mercedes cars. Lewis Hamilton put up a good performance. He's been very good this year, showing that he still has it. I know last year it was a little bit. There was some questions if it really was just the car, or if he took some getting used to. But Hamilton, he's back. He's performing at a very high level. Um, really had a chance at the P2, but Alonso was just better, I guess. Um,
A bit of a controversial moment with Hamilton, though, was the pit stops, especially with him getting released um, unsafely in front of Alonso. What, do you guys? When I took a look at that on the live TV, I kind of felt like that was like a slam dunk penalty. Like, so it's very clear that Hamilton was released unsafely, and to be honest, I don't really understand why they didn't give him a penalty. So my question is for both of you: do you guys think that that was a penalty? And two, if it is, then why did the stewards just call it a racing incident or whatever they called it and just decide to take no action on it?
yeah, I when I was watching the race, I was watching with my brother, and I was like, that's gonna be a penalty. I was surprised when it didn't happen. I was surprised that Norris didn't get a penalty for his release, although they got him for something else. It was kind of less egregious. But yeah, I mean, people have been complaining about the stewards forever. I think at least they were consistently lenient in this race with that particular offense. Um, but yeah, I mean, there just needs to be more, unity between what the stewards interpret the rules as, and that definitely was an unsafe release. I think by the time they investigated it or whatever, Alonso had got back ahead of Hamilton, I guess. But I mean, still, it's just I don't know. It didn't really impact the race that much, but I think it's just the stewards being strange again.
Yeah, I think that if that's the reason, like it didn't impact the race enough, then that's a stupid reason. Like that could have ended, or at least severely damaged, the races of two of the three podium drivers. I mean, at least they didn't give like Norris a penalty for the exact same thing. But they kind of just have to look at it and see that it was like a second away from it just being a crash. And it was Hamilton got lucky. Hamilton got very lucky that that unsafe release didn't end up worse than it did. But I think that just saying that, like, If the reasoning was that it didn't affect the race much, then that's stupid because I don't know how far ahead Hamilton was of Perez, but he still should have gotten a penalty.
Yeah, I agree. It doesn't really make sense because you can only tell from hindsight if it doesn't affect the race. And as far as I know, the decision to take no action on Hamilton was made, you know, during the race. Now, what happens if he makes a mistake on the last lap and he loses a couple seconds to Hamilton? Hamilton gets through. And with Hamilton having no penalty, he keeps that position. So you can only determine whether it affects the race from hindsight after the race. So yeah, it doesn't really make sense. I wonder if one way to prevent this in the future is, just the stewards being more transparent, um, giving the public a way to, I guess, see what they're seeing, if you can put it that way, see their reasoning, see their insight, um, see the reasons why they made that decision in the first place. Because at this point, I think all we see is no action required or 5-second penalty. And even with Lando's penalty, with the unsportsmanlike behavior, whatever that was, we didn't really understand what that was either until later on. So I think maybe just more transparency would help fix some of their consistency issues. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think definitely more transparency, and also I've heard people, and I agree with this, calling for just like a unified. Because I don't really know how it works, if they choose the stewards or if there's stewards from every like that country that are in charge of all the races there, or the city. I have no idea how exactly it works, but it seems that there's no like how the NBA have a collection of referees or MLB a collection of umpires. There's no like collection of stewards that officiate every single race, and that just creates a very arbitrary kind of changing the rules every weekend, and it just makes it confusing. And then along with that, they also don't explain their decisions. And yeah, I mean, no one really knew what Lando did until after the race. I know I thought it was him just driving too slow, like in the safety car queue, not the virtual safety car. I guess it was at that point. Actually, I guess I don't know, but no one really knew exactly what he was doing. So, and then yeah, I mean, Lewis should have been penalized for that. Lando probably was less egregious a little bit, but still was probably worth a penalty for his unsafe release. That's just, I mean, yeah, you're right, Kenji, about the hindsight. You don't know until after how it might impact the race, and I think they just need to be more consistent.
Yeah, doesn't the stewarding like change like every race too? I don't think they like just grab stewards from that country or anything like that. It like changes every race. Like they get a bunch of like former drivers and stuff to steward the race. So yeah, I think just having, like you said, Charlie, like a collective body that officiates every single race or stewards every race would go a long way towards maintaining consistency in the decision making process. Kind of what we mentioned last week as well.
Yeah. On the other side of Mercedes, George Russell, he was doing pretty good the first few laps, kept up with Alonso and his teammate, and then had that crash, recovered, and then had to retire. So, I mean, he's showing that he is good, talented, but he just doesn't have that same consistency and experience that Lewis has. I think that's why Lewis has been easily the better driver this year.
I was surprised he kept going, the George Russell after that crash, because he completely like damaged his front wing, um, his rear tires, and despite all the damage, he still kept going. I know he retired later on, but yeah, it was just kind of surprising to see him continue on even after the damage he sustained in that crash.
Yeah, he kind of showed that he belongs where he's at, and that he can help Mercedes push for this P2, um, rather than like on the other hand we have Stroll as I guess Aston Martin's or like second driver, who's not helping them as much. But I think that just like his recovery was really shocking because he took out like almost half his car and somehow stayed in. And I mean, unfortunately, he ended up having a mechanical issue and had to retire. But he sort of showed that he belongs. And of course, like all he really needs is more experience because he's only been or he's one of the younger drivers. But he's also showing that he's one of the better drivers on the grid, or one of the best drivers on the grid. And he's showing real promise in that he could be like, I guess if Hamilton retires in the next few years, then maybe he could be the face of the team, or that he could be the face of other teams as well.
Yeah, moving on to Ferrari. Round of applause for Ferrari. They finally, got the strategy right. To be honest, I didn't think they were going to, but, credit to them. Yeah, I mean, Leclerc 4th, Sainz 5th. Jeez. All right. 5th, if I'm not mistaken. Good race from them. They held off Perez. Impressive. But I think that's kind of their potential. I don't think they're as good as the Mercedes or the Aston Martin in the hands of Lewis or Fernando. So, yeah, I mean, that's probably about as good as they can do. Alpine, what was it? Ocon got 8th, right? Gasly had a unlucky weekend all the way around. He pit before the safety car and lost out because of that, and then the qualifying incident with Sainz. Yeah, so Ferrari and Alpine, y'all have any thoughts on those two teams?
Ferrari was a big surprise. I remember during the race, I was I was texting Tim and Charlie, and I was like, oh, Ferrari messed up the strategy again. I don't know why they didn't hit during the safety car. I thought they had totally screwed up the race, and credit to them for making the strategy work. In hindsight, it was a good strategy, not getting stuck behind the DRS train that formed behind Albon, I think it was. So, yeah, it was a great surprise to see that their strategy was as competitive as it was, considering that they've been horrible in strategy in the past. With Alpine, didn't Ocon have like that issue of the rear wing that Lando was complaining about, where it was like flying,
it
was like
was
bouncing
just
around?
wobbling back and forth, and I think Lando just wanted the black and orange flag, but I don't know if it actually had any danger of falling off, but it looked pretty strange. But yeah, he couldn't get past the Williams, which is interesting. I thought he would.
Well, I mean, Albon, before in our the preview on last week, I kind of mentioned how Williams had really great straight line pace, and I think that kind of helped them in Canada. With Canada, you have the back straight, obviously, which is super long and start finish straight. So just having those extra kilometers per hour on the straight kind of helps you keep the lead on those main overtaking zones. But with that being said, Albon put in a brilliant performance, to be honest. I think he did 50 or 60 laps on a single set. So that was just incredible. And 7th is a phenomenal result for Williams, who have been struggling this year. So, yeah, I'm kind of sad that I didn't really pick him for my points finisher because I kind of talked about how good he might have been. But, yeah, I'm really happy for him, and I'm really happy that he's kind of developing as a driver as well from his Red Bull days.
Yeah.
I think he could. Sorry.
You got it.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think he could be a really great driver as well in the future.
Yeah, I saw some graphic. I don't know if it was practice qualifying or whatever, but it was It was like an outline of the track, and it showed that Albon was like faster than Max in a lot of places. So that's good on you for picking him to be, or on like your hindsight being good on him being a good racer this weekend. And then I also have you down as picking him for the sneaky points, so you got a point for that. But anyway,
I don't think I picked Albin though. I thought I picked someone else.
I don't know.
Albin was one the guy was, but I wouldn't be surprised if he got a point. So I don't think I should like get any points for that.
Okay,
To be honest.
I have him down on like my notes from when I was editing it, but I can re-listen to that.
Yeah, if you go back and see that I did, then we can just count it. Otherwise, yeah,
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
it's no sweat. Yeah.
Yeah, great performance from Williams' team and Albon. Um, yeah, to be able to stay in front of them without DRS was impressive and frustrating for me as a Norris fan. Alfa Romeo, Bottas got points, right? He got passed by Stroll at the line, I think. So he only got 1 point, but he had a pretty good race. I mean, I don't know. He hasn't really been the driver I think Alfa Romeo had in mind, but he still got it occasionally. McLaren had a weird race. They looked really good in the first half, and then got in the DRS train, just looked flat. Piastri made a couple of mistakes after he looked really good at the start. Norris had a really good race, and then the weird penalty. I don't know. I guess my take is, I don't know. I mean, I guess it's kind of unsportsmanlike, but I feel like that's just kind of part of the game. Like, it was a smart move. I'm sure people have done it before. And the fact that there's no actual rule against it, it's just that they pulled out some super generic unsportsmanlike penalty is kind of upsetting. But I get where they're coming from with the penalty, but I feel like if they want to enforce this, they should make it an actual rule. And the fact that they gave him a penalty for this, but there was all those other incidents that they didn't give penalties, is just kind of strange.
Yeah, the problem with Norris's penalty, I think, was just the inconsistency. Because I think there is a rule that says like you can't drive too slow under safety car. I think like the thing they get you on is usually like driving unnecessarily slowly or something. Um, so there is a rule, but they just never enforced it, and I think that's kind of why Lando felt like he could take advantage of that. Because if we go back to like 2021 with Bottas, I think it was Saudi Arabia where he like drove super slowly with Max behind him during the safety car, so that like he could open up the gap to Lewis. And I think that's kind of what Norris was trying to do here in Canada as well. So I just think it's yet another issue of consistency. Just not enforcing the same rules as you are supposed to. You did previously as well. And it was kind of stupid that they put it under like unsportsmanlike behavior because that's kind of ridiculous. You have a rule for it, so just put it under that rule. Don't make up some BS about it being unsportsmanlike because you have you have a rule too, I guess, that you have to enforce. It's not just some random thing you have to make up. So yeah, I think it's just another consistency issue from the stewards.
Yeah, I don't know. Admittedly I'm a Norris fan, but it's kind of unfortunate to see. He was like the only person actually making overtakes in the DRS train. No one else could really seem to do it, and it's not like that McLaren's any faster than those other cars, really. So, he deserved to get some points. I think he was one of the better drivers in that race, but it is what it is. I know McLaren is supposed to have some big upgrades for the next race. We'll see what happens with them. Haas had a kind of highs and lows weekends. Magnussen got second in qualifying.
Hulkenberg.
My bad, Hulkenberg. Second in qualifying, only to get a penalty for that lap, and then just didn't have the pace in the race. I don't think anyone was surprised about that. Just off rip, immediately falling down the order. Maybe he could have gotten some points if he had started in second, but you never know. And then Magnussen and De Vries had one of the stupidest. I don't know what was going on. That was probably at the point where I'd kind of stopped watching fully, and I just look up and I see them both like going down the lane next to each other. It's pretty funny.
Just like De Vries was running in like 13 or 14, so like he wasn't at the very bottom. And I was like, oh, cool, look, De Vries. He's not having a bad race. And then like 5 minutes later, he's locking up and taking Magnussen down like an exit road with him. And it's just like, seriously, like you were finally showing that you weren't. Or like he wasn't really showing much. Like the AlphaTauri isn't that bad, but it's just like De Vries' terrible season continues. Like it's just embarrassing for him probably.
Yeah, and I think he was the one at fault for that crash.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
pretty sure. So
Or I was just watching
he
it.
locked up, and then Magnussen couldn't turn. So
Yeah. Magnussen was just stuck. It's just like stupid.
there they go.
De Vries down the inside. Oh, never mind.
Jeez.
Yeah.
They're trying to find that path that Perez took last year. Yeah. Not much to talk about these two teams. They're both kind of not great. They do get up there in qualifying though. The Haas, especially Hulkenberg, he's been impressive this year. He seems to be always in Q3 like every other race, and not just in like 10th. You get up to 7th and 5th,
P2 was crazy.
Yeah, I mean, y'all got anything else on the teams front? Any drivers? So I know we got a special segment to close us out here, but we good?
I'm good.
Yeah.
All right, you want to run over the results from our predictions real quick?
Yeah. All right, so we all got 1 point each from Max Verstappen winning. None of us got our P2 right. I had Russell, Kenji had Checo, Charlie had Lewis. And then Kenji got P3 right with Lewis. Both of us had Checo. All three of us had Fernando in P4. And then none of us got any of the P5s right. Charlie had Stroll, and then me and Kenji each had one of the Mercedes. So that just moves Charlie up into first even more with 19 points. Or actually, no, Kenji's sort of catching him with 11 points. And then I'm sitting down there with 7. So I need to have a good race one of these next couple race weekends. So yeah, not great.
Charlie, your championship is at risk. I'm calling it right now.
Is it?
I mean, at this point, I need, what is it, like 4 more weekends to take the lead? 4 more weekends of gaining 3 points on you?
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
So,
yeah. Good math right there.
your championship is at risk, bro. You need to step up your game.
Okay.
Anyway, y'all ready to get on to the higher-lower game?
Yeah, if you lose to me in this, Kenji, I don't know what to say.
Yeah.
I
What
think
you
you
mean,
should
bruh?
you should have your points from the predictions.
Oh, my.
Yeah.
All right, let's get it.
Shout out to John Boy Media for this idea. We're doing it a little bit differently, so we're just going to do 2 new people every time rather than keep one onto the next one. But this episode, we're going to be doing career points. I limited it to either current drivers or drivers who are like reserve drivers who have retired in the last year or two. So I'm going to say one, and then y'all got a couple minutes or a little while to figure it out. Not a couple minutes. A couple minutes is way too long. A little while to figure it out. So the first one is the 2 Ferrari drivers. We got Leclerc versus Sainz. Who has more career points? Starting it off a little easy, I hope.
Leclerc or Sainz?
Yeah.
Is that what you said?
Leclerc or Sainz?
That's a good question. Because Leclerc, I don't know. I lean towards him. Actually, give me a sec.
I don't know. Sainz has been in the league longer, I think. Yeah, he definitely has. At least a year. But he was at Renault, Toro Rosso, McLaren.
I think it's probably Leclerc, to be honest.
Yeah, I'd go Leclerc too. I
Because
wouldn't be
Leclerc-
surprised if it's close though.
Yeah, because Leclerc, he has like what? He's been really strong at Ferrari, even like 2019.
Yeah, he got some wins.
Yeah, in 2020, 2021. Sainz, yeah, he's been a good driver. He's been up there, but he ain't been like the same level of Leclerc, right?
I think Sainz beat him in 2021 though. But
maybe. Yeah.
Oh shit, really?
yeah, I think
Well, I
Sainz,
thought
Sainz
Leclerc
got
was
5th, or I don't know. All right, just tell us.
Okay, Leclerc has 932. Sainz has 857.5 from that wild Suzuka race last year.
Okay.
With the
Charlie, why are you coughing, bruh?
Me?
I'm just kidding. Yeah, I'm just kidding.
All right,
I'm not
so
coughing.
I've got 4 for y'all, so 3 left. We got Alex Albon or Kevin Magnussen.
I feel like Magnussen, but let me think about it first, because Magnussen's been like veteran, right? He's been racing forever. Albon came in 2019. Let me think about it though. Go back to the history.
Albon was in the Red Bull for like what, 1.5 years. Then at Williams, Magnussen was at. It's been around since like 2014, right? Didn't he replace Lewis at McLaren? 2013.
Actually, yeah, that's a fair point with the Red Bull.
He went to
No, no.
Haas. Haas was decent their first year. Was out for a year, then came back. Shoot.
Magnussen, his rookie season was 2014, right? And then
Yeah, it's 2014 or 2013, I think.
who did he drive for first? Was
I
it
think it was,
McLaren
I
or
think
was
it was McLaren.
Okay, well then McLaren was trash in 2014 though. When they had the Honda engines.
Yeah.
So I think Albon. Yeah, actually.
I'm gonna take Magnussen. I'm probably wrong, but
All right.
Albon had a lot of. He wasn't good in the Red Bull, but he was.
I know
He wasn't-
Magnussen got a podium in the McLaren though. Pretty sure. It might have been like his first race.
Man, I don't even remember it. Yeah,
I think I've just heard that somewhere. I don't know.
I think it's Albon though, to be honest.
Locking it in.
Yeah.
All right. Kevin Magnussen had 185 points. Alex Albon has 208.
Oh, damn.
So Albon has more. All right, now it's going to get a little bit closer. We got Pierre Gasly versus George Russell.
Okay. This is closer.
All right. So Gasly's first season was 2018. But then he won a couple of times too with AlphaTauri, and then he was with Red Bull.
Yeah, I think he has a win. Or he does have a win.
He won with AlphaTauri.
It's like Monza.
Yeah, in 2020. But then has Russell won? He has, right?
Russell won Brazil last year.
I think that's
Yeah.
only one though, right?
Yeah, he's only won once.
I think just because Russell has more podiums, I feel like he has more points, even though he started later. I don't know though because Gasly's not been a bad driver either in AlphaTauri and even Alpine. Shoot. Um. Yeah, I think it's Russell,
Yeah,
but
I'm gonna go Russell too. I think it's Russell.
yeah.
All right, so we got Pierre Gasly with 348 and George Russell with 359. So it's an
Damn.
11-point
Oh,
gap.
so
All right.
damn.
He might.
That was hard though. That was hard. Yeah.
All right, this one is going to be harder, or maybe, I don't know. So this is between one current driver and one reserve driver from that team, Checo or Daniel Ricciardo.
Oh man.
Shoot.
I should notice because I'm a big Red Bull fan. Perez, he's had a lot of podiums, but not a lot of wins, though, right?
Yeah. He's been around for forever though.
He was with McLaren, was Perez when he started.
Shoot, I thought he was around
Uh,
before that.
Really?
I think he's been around since like 2011, 2012. He was on one of those trash ass teams.
He was with Sauber. He was with Sauber, right?
Yeah, he was with Sauber.
Yeah. And then he went to let me think. Was it McLaren after that in 2012 or 2013? I think it was. And then he went to Force India. It's hard because Ricardo's been here for a while as well.
Two vets.
I don't know. Perez definitely had more last year.
And Ricardo had a lot of, but then Ricardo had a lot of retirements in 2018. He had like 11, remember? So, and Perez has been able to finish more, like consistently. I think honestly it's Perez, even though they probably started around the same time, just because Ricardo hasn't like finished a lot with Red Bull, because his engine kept blowing up with Renault.
Yeah, I don't know. Tim said it's close. I'm gonna take Ricardo, just on the opposite side of it.
Perez. Yeah, Perez.
All right. Locked in.
Yeah.
Charlie,
Yeah.
you would have been right a week ago.
Damn.
Perez has 1,328 and Ricardo has 1,320. So this past week Perez got Ricardo. This was like a
And he got
kind of
9 points this last week, right? It's the fastest lap.
yeah, he barely passed him.
That's tough.
So yeah, congratulations Kenji. You went 4 for 4. Charlie went 2 for 4. I don't think we'll
That
count
last
this
one was the
total.
hardest.
Yeah, no. I was looking at like
No, it's just
Go ahead.
nothing. Sorry, I keep cutting you off. Sorry.
No, you're good. I was just saying, like, I was looking at the career points, and I was looking at the bottom, and I went up, and I saw that Perez passed Ricardo, like, this past week. So I was like, that's going to not be easy.
It was hard though that last one because when did Ricardo start? Can you look that up? Because my computer's being slow. Like it won't open Google. Because I think they started like at a similar time, but just because Ricardo kept retiring like a million times, I think.
He made his debut in 2011.
And then Perez was 2011 too, right? Or they both had the same debut times or similar.
Perez might have been earlier than that.
Perez was also 2011
Yeah,
with
never mind.
Sauber. Yeah, Ricardo was with HRT.
HRP.
HRT.
Who
Hold
that
up,
Honda?
is HR?
Isn't that Honda?
Yeah, that's the Honda racing team.
Oh, okay. I'm dumb.
No, you're good. But yeah, congratulations,
Yeah.
Kenji. Next week I'll come
Yeah.
back with a new
GG's.
stat.
GG's. All right. I'll be back. All right.
I owe you. Yeah. Well, GG Charlie. That was a fun activity. So
no,
yeah, I
that-
hope we
that
can
was a
keep
good-
doing it in the
That was
future.
a good segment. All right. Thank you guys for listening.
It was pretty close. So like, yeah.
Yeah, no, that was good. All right. Thank you guys for listening. We will be back next week with some Austria previews. There should be some interesting upgrades, you know. And Austria is always a pretty fun track. So, yep. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.